Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good
How's
afternoon.
everybody?
Good.
Everybody's good?
Yes.
You're not whiny or complaining or any of that?
I mean, I can be if you like.
No.
It won't do any good.
That's exactly right. Just need to make it better. It's not what you want, you just need to make it better. That's the way the world works. Go ahead. I got a text a while ago. Did y'all get a text? I guess it was from Dr. Payne that she was going to be late. I don't know, from somebody. Said, I'm going to be 15 or 20 minutes late. See you soon. I'm guessing it's her. I don't know. Doesn't have, it just says mass text. So I'm guessing that's it. So we'll go ahead. Who we got with us? We got 4, 8, 12. We got 12 or 14. So that's enough. We'll get started. So let me share my screen. Let's look and see what our weekly was for this week. And get over here. So this is us, isn't it? Wednesday, 11/9, presentation leading with inquiry and action. Cap task 3 due for review. And group project 1, assignment, discussion board, reflect on this statement. The multifaceted role of the principal as buffer and bridger as facilitator and focuser illustrates the versatility and skill needed by today's great leaders. What's this statement say to you and the areas of focus, exploration, and growth you need to embark on? All right, so do we have a presentation tonight? Is somebody planning to do this? Is this one of your presentations?
Not tonight.
No, I think they're moved to the 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. I could be very wrong about that.
They're
That
on
is
the
not my
7th.
group, but I think those are moved.
They're on the 7th.
They're on the 7th.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, the 7th. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we don't have any student presentations tonight. Do we have any group projects tonight?
No, I think we're supposed to present those on the 7th and maybe work on them on the 3rd on that Saturday, maybe.
Okay. All right. What have y'all been working on at the Raider Center?
Our group project. Oh, you mean, do you
I'm
mean
looking
for
at-
class or do you mean for this past week?
What'd y'all do this past week?
We worked on our group projects.
Worked on your group project. Now, y'all have been exploring elementary, middle, and high school curriculum. Is that right?
High
On
school
some
will
of
be the
those-
next one coming up.
High school will be the next. All
Yeah.
right. And so what did y'all do when it was middle school curriculum? What did y'all do for that one?
We went through some of the middle school expectations. We also talked about the new walkthrough instrument that Gaston County has designed for middle school. We talked about how the new schedule that the county has designed goes across all middle schools so that we can be kind of watch the pacing, how they're looking at how are we using our power standards and is everybody kind of on pace and tracking and pacing it out regardless of which school that you're at, so that when we switch kids around, they're still kind of along the same lines as in terms of curriculum and pacing. So
There's also a common PLT on Wednesdays for middle school as well.
And the purpose of that common PLT is what? I mean,
to collect data for power standards, to see how we're doing collectively as a county, And then it also allows the curriculum facilitator to determine whether or not we need to slow down or speed up, or what do we need to do to make sure that across the county, we're addressing areas and power standards where the students collectively were not successful last year. How do we make those adjustments and improvements across the county this year?
What kind of improvements is the county, I mean, what are they looking to focus the improvements on? I mean, what kind of answers are they looking for here?
So for our school, because we are low performing, they've actually used some of the facilitators to come in and to work with teachers in particular who did not perform well, and looking at, okay, how do we help support these teachers? And in addition to that, our school is implementing some of the Get Better Faster model so that we can make the adjustments through the teachers, because I mean, if they keep teaching, we can expect pretty much the same results if we don't, I mean, if we don't help them, teach better or become stronger teachers. So that's one of the approaches that they're doing. Also, there's countywide common formative assessments. So they're utilizing that data to see, as far as our curriculum, are we missing it because of the curriculum, or are we missing it because of the instruction that's being offered for the curriculum?
Okay.
So a lot of the things that happen in the PLT for the county is they're saying, this is the power standard for next week. We want to know how you're going to introduce this to your students. How are you going to know when they've got it? What are you going to do if they don't? What are you going to do if they do? So we're using that PLC, those 4 essential questions countywide to address those areas.
Okay. When you say teacher performance, teachers who are not performing, what is the metric or the measure that you're using to say this teacher is not performing at a satisfactory level?
So one of the metrics that they've used at my school in particular is EVOS. And
There you go.
yeah. And then the other, of course, is just comparing our CFA data compared to the county level. Like, are we underperforming across the power standards, or, how are our teachers matching up?
All right. So if you do the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. That's the theory of insanity, right? Well, you can't just tell teachers you got to get better. You have to show them how to improve. Now we'll talk about that in just a minute. We'll talk about Argus's double loop theory. That's actually a real thing. Doing the same thing over and over again. That's an actual theoretical framework that some of our doctoral students use is Argus's double loop theory, double loop learning. We'll talk about that in a minute. So comparative accountability is about who you get. Growth accountability is about what you do with it. And that's why when we talk about teachers underperforming, we can't say, well, this group is underperforming at this middle school compared to that middle school over there. They've got a different population. What we're looking at is that notion that they're underperforming their students that they've got. And I want to look at a couple things here. Let me share my screen. And you'll have to excuse me in that I have I'm gonna have to go here to get it. Okay. Here we go. Uh, Doodly 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 doo. You can do it. All right. So let's look briefly at EVOS. Now, I have explained to you, and if you don't remember, there are 10 variables that 10 dependent variables that predict a child's test score. Anybody remember what any of those 10 variables are? Somebody, anybody? How is that projected growth score of a child in EVOS, how is it derived? I mean, what is the system that says Dale's got to score this much on this test to show a year's growth? Where does that come from? What are the variables?
I would assume that one variable would be the previous year's level of achievement.
Yeah, but it's only 5%. Only
Right.
5% of the variance. All right. So have I
Dr.
not
Layla,
shown you? Have I not shown you the EVOS model before? Did you not cover that in 602?
I think we did have a posting in our shell about that. And if I remember correctly, some of the variables were race, whether the parents graduated high school,
That
whether they
is correct.
graduated college.
There you go. All right, so
those-
let's look at that right quick. Pardon me, Dad. Let's look at that right quick. Let me see if I can get to that one. Here we go. So after 20 years of test scores, it's now over 30. All those test scores with the variables for the kids were dumped into a big database, and analysis of variance was run. And they did a linear regression, and they said these are the 10 variables. And so this is how much each one counts for. Race 30%, mother's education 15, father's income 15, teacher 10. We assume the teacher's 10. We're trying to isolate the teacher. School district, school grade, age, gender, previous test scores. Those are the things that count. Those are the variance in a child's test score. And so what we do with the EVOS model tries to isolate whether that teacher is adding value or not. All these other things are controlled for. So the way it would work is this. Jamar's a third grade student in Charlotte Mecklenburg. His dependent variables are: he's black, he gets 20 out of 30. White's 30 out of 30. Hispanic, 15 out of 30. That's not racist. That's just how scores purred out. Mother less than a high school diploma, 5 out of 15. If she had beyond a 4-year degree, it would be 15. No father in home, 0 out of 15. Father's income in excess of 150 would be 15, because if dad makes enough money, mama stays at home and does that lap time thing with kids. High wealth, we always assume the teacher 10. High wealth is district is 5, low wealth's 2. Billingsville was a takeover school. A high growth school would have been 5, grade 5. He's not a repeater, so he gets 5 points. If he'd been a repeater, he'd have got 2. However, he only got 3 because he was 9 years old. He was developmentally delayed, and he started school at 6 years old. Gender 5, female would be 4, do the differential in math and reading test. This is a math test. Be the opposite if it were a reading test. Previous scores 2, because he wasn't on grade level according to M-class data. So his equation looks like this. We add all those together. So he has to score 55. He has to get 55% of the test questions on the EOG for math right in order to show a year's growth if the teacher put her 10% in. And so we multiply, there's 180 questions on that test, by 0.55, 55%. So he's got to get 99 out of 180 to show a year's growth. If he doesn't, it means the teacher did not add her 10%. That's how EVOS works. Every kid has their own individual score. And so our metrics are this, and I'll stop my sharing, we'll go back. Here are our metrics. 85% of your students in your classroom have to make growth for you to be an effective teacher. And 85% of the teachers in the building have to make growth for you, your school to show growth. That's how it works. And so when we talk about effective teaching and the teachers who aren't effective, their kids aren't showing growth. We have to make sure that we don't get into comparative accountability because everybody doesn't have the same kids. I'm betting the kids over in Cramerton are probably a little bit higher scoring than the kids in, let's say, Bessemer City. I don't know that, but I'd guess that. Why?
Higher income.
For the same reasons that I just explained on that EVOS model. Higher education, more income, high wealth school, better performance. Those things matter. And so we can't start comparing one school to another. That's comparative accountability. And that's about who you get, not what you do with them. Growth is that. One of your biggest tasks is you're going to have to explain to teachers how these numbers are derived, because teachers have all these notions that they just pull these numbers out of the air, or they're just based on previous tests. No, it's much more in depth than that. And if you look at that model, you understand that it's just as easy to get growth out of any child, because it's not about a group or a comparison. It's about that child. And that's one of the things that teachers believe is I want that kids or those kids because they're easier to get to make growth with. It's all the same. It's been level, so it's all the same. That's the notion. So let's look at some school-wide and some teacher scores. Let me share my screen. We'll go back to that one. Let me get that out of the way. All right. So when you talk about the school making growth, you have standard error here, or same as standard deviation. And so if you fall from 0 to 1.99 standard errors of the mean or standard deviations of the mean, either way, then you have made growth. If you're 2 or less below standard deviations or standard errors, or 2 or more above, then you're above blue. If you're below, you're red. So anywhere here in the middle, you're green as the school in terms of your growth. Now, here's how it's all calculated. 2 standard errors above significant evidence school students made more growth than expected. Between 1 and 2, moderate but not significant evidence school students made growth. Between 1 standard error above and below, evidence school students made growth. And between 1 and 2, students made less growth. And in more than 2, they made less growth than expected. And so that's pretty simple. But let's look at a couple teachers. I've got some other things here. This is where I really wanted to get to, is this chart right here. What are you going to do here, hero? You got teacher A, got 3 years for quartile 1 students met, quartile 2 met, quartile 4 met, quartile 5 met, or this is quintiles, excuse me. All right, so this is your lowest, and this 1 is your lowest and 5 is your highest, just like any scale. What's the problem here?
The students consistently failed that third.
The absolute middle child does not do well with this teacher. What is all right, aspiring administrators? What potentially could be the problem there? I mean, y'all, welcome, Dr. Payne. Y'all are working on teacher observations. But a big part of when you talk about teachers not performing is their actual student performance, how well their kids are doing. What might be the problem if you've got 5 quintiles of teachers? We'll talk about the other one. This is the one that I always like to bring up to students. You've got a teacher, you got 5 quintiles of students, and the 2 bottom and the 2 top knocking it out of the park. The middle one, crickets, nothing, every time, consistently, year after year. What is the problem?
Dr. Lamb, can you define a quintile?
You divide
More from-
students into five achievement levels. That's what a quintile is. Quartile would be 4 levels.
Yeah,
That's the
got it.
bottom 20%, then the 40%, then 60, then 80, then 100. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. 5 quintiles. They divide them into 5. That helps you fine tune a little bit more.
Yeah,
I think it could be that those kids that get put in your comfortable area, they're not necessarily the ones that you gave interventions to that were the lower of the students, and they're not necessarily your higher students. Kind of like how it's harder to challenge your higher students. You have those that get caught in the middle that don't get challenged enough, or sometimes they get ignored because they don't need the challenge, they don't need the extra intervention. And it may work for a while, but when they get to a certain point, they start to fall behind.
Okay.
It's kind of what I think
So-
about that, but I've never looked at, I'm like Wood, I'm not super familiar with that. So I'm just kind of going on what I think.
maybe
there.
they didn't provide enough extension for maybe the teacher could have challenged those students a little more. And that, those students were just meeting, the basic expectations. And they required a little bit further extension than what was being proposed.
I look at it a little bit different because I don't think that it was an extension. I think that the teacher might not have been teaching to the full rigor of the standard, because those kids are the bubble kids. And like, to me, like, I'm a bubble kid teacher anyway. Like, I guess being at the school I was at for so long, like she or he just didn't get them to like even where they needed to be. Like if those low kids are growing, she's teaching like below level to me because they're making the growth. And then the higher kids are naturally usually going to show some growth anyway, regardless of what you're doing, because they pick up on things quicker. But the middle kids are just not getting the full standard, the rigor.
I'd agree with the rigor aspect of that. Absolutely.
I think it's pretty evident. I think Angie just hit the nail on the head. It's pretty evident that this teacher's not teaching to the standard. I believe that's kind of been a theme that we've talked about, or y'all have talked about. I've just mostly been listening. Y'all have been talking about all semesters, making sure you teach the standards. This is the classic example of not teaching to the standards. It's exactly what this is. And so these are the kinds of things that when we talk about we're working with lower teachers, the ones that aren't performing well, this is exactly what we've got to look at. And you've got to be able to diagnose by looking at that chart. We're going to go back just one more minute, Dr. Payne. I'm taking your time, but I'm sorry, but I will get back. We're going to do this. Tell me about, so that's teacher A. This teacher is not teaching to the standard. She has, pardon my language, dumbed it down. That's exactly what's going on there. All right, let's look at this one and we'll be done. What is this teacher doing? The lower kid and the middle kid are doing fine. They're actually exceeding, they're wearing it out. But look at the upper kids, what's happening with them? What's happening here?
Mm-hmm. Looks like they're just getting flat out ignored, but that, that's just me looking at that first time.
If I were guessing, and this one circles back to, if you'll remember the last case study of the summer, what was that teacher doing with the high kids?
She was having them teach the other ones. That's
The
exactly
low and
what I
middle
was thinking.
kids, and they were just
Yep.
vegetating,
Yep.
weren't they?
Yep.
That would be my guess. Now she's wearing it out with the low and middle kids. I suspect she's got 4, 5, 6, or 8 student helpers in her room. And what they're doing is they're working with those kids. That would be my best guess of what's going on there. Now, don't think that doesn't happen often. You know, divide and conquer mentality. The first teacher's not teaching to the standards. To Angie's point, she's teaching way below the standard. She's targeting her lessons at the low child. The second teacher is using the upper child to help teach the low and the middle kids. That would be your best bet on that. But the whole point here, and I'll end this up, is you've got to be able to look at your data to help you figure out what's going on. Yeah, you know who your low performing or your not performing teacher is, but what are you going to do now, hero? What are you going to do to fix it? And as we said, as Daphne was talking about before, you can't just do the same thing over and over again and hope for a different result. That's just hope. That's not a plan. And so you've got to be able to diagnose problems. And so hopefully, we did a quick review of EVOS and the model. You understand these are the kinds of conversations you've got to have with your faculty. That we're going to be looking at data. We're going to be looking at growth. We're not going to hold you accountable to compare with somebody across town who's got different kids than you. We're talking about what you do with your kids in your room. And when you get teachers to understand that we are going to hold you accountable, there is an accountability for what you do with your kids. No, you can't make them be the kids across town, but you can make the ones you've got be the best that they can do. And that's the critical conversation that you've got to have when you start talking about teacher performance. All right, I'm done, Dr. Payne. I didn't know that. I'm just making stuff up mostly here. But thank you for the time. You're still muted.
Sorry. Thank y'all for giving me that time. I had something I had to finish today before the day ended. And what you did, Dr. Lamb, goes right into what we're going to do. So guess what subgroup is one of our greatest subgroups that don't show growth as a district? They are proficient, but they don't show growth.
Is that middle group? Is that what you mean?
But it's not the middle group.
The AIG.
It's our AIG kids. They don't
AIG.
grow. Why do they not grow?
AIG.
They're not challenged.
They're not challenged. How many times do you think, and this is one of the things that I try to do with my staff always, helping your staff understand every child, you have to identify their starting point and they need to grow a year. Every child. So if I start way down here, I need to grow a year. If I start right here, does that mean I'm good or do I need to grow a year? You have those kids for a year. Every child in your class should grow for a year. And one of the things that you can help your student or your staff do when you become an administrator, your EC kids should grow a year, your AIG kids should grow a year, your Reg Ed kids should grow a year, your EL kids should grow a year. I always told my teachers, and it's very simple, because sometimes we make things really hard and people don't get it. Every kid can earn 2 points. They can earn a proficiency point and they can earn a growth point. You can use iReady. You can use a different tool in high school. I know at Warlick we use iExcel, but you can find out what tool you're using in your building to measure growth and proficiency. Some kids are not going to get you a proficiency point. There is such a gap. It doesn't mean they're not going to learn, but there is such a gap. But those kids should by far get you those exceeding growth points, right? Because that's how you close gaps. You've got to be able to have those kind of conversations with your teachers. Does that make sense what I'm saying? You've got to be able to use that EVOS data. Who is our contact in Gaston County that's going to be your data person when you need to start really looking at data and talking data? Who knows who that person is?
Barbara James.
Barbara James.
Barbara James,
Steve Smith.
Steve
Rebecca
Smith,
Powers.
Rebecca Powers. They will sit down with you and explain data through and through and through so you can be confident in going back to your school. Okay? It is so important for you to be able to not just give your teachers their data. Just like when you give them evaluation data, observation data, and you talk to them about what are the next steps from this, what are our action steps out of your evaluation, when you give them back their performance data, their growth data, you have to say, what are next steps? There has to be action steps. What are we going to do with this data? Because data on a piece of paper with no action is pointless, right? So you've got to be able to analyze that data and help your teachers. When my teachers came back from EOGs, one of the things that I did was we sat down and we said, how many of your kids got proficiency points? EOG. How many kids got a proficiency point? How many kids got a growth point? How do they know that? How do you know if you get meet growth on an EOG? Went off on a little sidebar real quick. Do y'all know how you know if your kids show growth on an EOG or EOC?
When you get your EVOS report, you can find your students individually or in small groups according to their skill level.
So you can do that in your EVOS report. But we just got EVOS reports and my kids took the test in May. How do I know in May whether my kids meet growth?
I usually use that, that document that has the power standards on it, and or not that document necessarily, but it has the scale scores and it tells you where they were at, and then you can compare it to see where they were last year and where they are this year. Like what was a level 3 last year? What's a level 3 this year? And you look at the scale scores that way.
You can do it with scale scores. That's going to show you if they grew in scale scores. But the way you're going to determine if they meet growth or exceed growth is look at that percentile. Imagine your school lined up in 100 kids. If they were number 39 on their beginning of grade test in 3rd grade, if they were 39, then they need to be at least 39 or better on that end of grade test to meet growth. Right? And you're trying to get to be first in line. If they're number 78 on that 5th grade EOG, what do they need to be by the end of their 6th grade EOG? If they're 79 on 5th grade, what do they need to be on 6th grade?
79 or better.
79 or better. That's how you can determine if they met growth or exceeded growth. Okay. They've got to keep in their rank. So they're compared to kids all across the state. And they're compared to where Jill scored here at the 39th percentile. Jill's peers at the 39th percentile stayed at the 39th percentile. She needs to stay at least where they are or do better than them, because those are kids who are like Jill. Okay. So those are just things that you need to begin thinking about is, how do I have data conversations? Is it important for me to have data conversations? And we talked about crucial conversations. I believe in being very transparent, but you got to build the culture to do that. I believe that my 3rd grade team comes in and we give everybody's data, and here's where it's at, because we're only as strong as our weakest link. And so if somebody on our team's weak, we're not mad, we're not anything, but we're going to grow you because you can't be our weak link anymore, right? And so you have to establish that culture. You may not be able to go in and establish that culture the first, hold one second, please, y'all. I'm sorry. My kid knows that I'm in class. I just need to say, are you good? Because she knows that this is my college girl, to make sure there's nothing wrong. But you need to be able to, you may not be able to establish that culture when you're the AP, but you need to be, again, learning how to take that data and having those crucial conversations so that when you become the principal, you can start to create that culture to where we all work together for the good. And we have to just be transparent with our data. EVOS data is huge. Knowing how to take your EOG data and look at it, knowing how to take your benchmark data, your iReady data, your iExcel data, your common assessment data, how to have those conversations or lead those conversations is huge. And that will lead us in today. So how is everybody? Alex, how's the new baby?
Oh, she's great. Everybody's doing good.
Good. Is mama enjoying life with 2?
Yeah, it's a little bit of an adjustment, but the good thing is she's sleeping. She's sleeping good. So,
Oh, that's good.
yeah. So,
Well, we're excited for you. How did your work session go to Wednesday last week? Did y'all get some stuff done? Did you get your email from Lolita about the upcoming Saturday? Are y'all good with that? It's an early morning, but get out of there so you can go do your stuff. So Dr. Lamb, we changed our next Saturday session. It's going to be the same day, but we are going to do like 7:30 in the morning because it's the month of December and so many people have Christmas things and other family events and stuff coming up. We're going to do an early morning and get in there and get out to make sure that we try to give them a chance to hear and experience and explore through the high school curriculum. We're going to do interview skills and practices. And then we're going to finalize our presentations for our last class. Is everybody good with that? Anybody got questions about that before we go on into our next part?
I have a
Okay.
question, and
Huh?
I'm just gonna ask it. So what if we may be given an opportunity to work the ELL camp on December 3rd and December 10th? So how might that work? Do you know what I'm talking about, right?
I do know what you're talking about, and that is a great question. I'm going to write it down and I will get y'all an answer,
Thanks.
because I know that we talked about Miss Huffman is not going to be there because she's going to be at the ELL camp.
Mhm.
What time is the ELL camp?
I think it's 8:30 to 11:30. Is that right, Megan?
Yes, that's what my principal told me.
How many people does that involve?
It may involve me as well.
But elementary,
Maybe.
like the dates I have are 2 different Thursdays after school. Is that right then? Not Saturdays?
I don't know about the elementary being after school. Is it after school? I'll find out.
I'll
So
find
Angie,
Slides that were
Megan,
shared with me was like the 1st and the 8th from like 2:30 to 5:30. So I was like, maybe that's wrong.
I'll ask. I'll ask and find out, and I'll send y'all anybody other than those 3. So I'll find out and shoot you 3 an email and let you know what we're doing, okay? Okay, so let me share my screen, and it may take me just a second because I just sat down. Give me 1 second.
I just want y'all to know if I show up in my pajamas, it's because I left at like 10 p.m. to make it by 7. All right. So no judgment.
Elementary has to be at work at 7 a.m. every day. So 7:30 is like an extra 30 for us.
So Wood, they don't want to hear anything about them pajamas.
Yeah. And I
They
don't
say
think
get
we'll
your
want
suit
to-
on.
I'm just kidding. Cramerton's like forever and a day away from where I live, so it's fine. It's not a big deal.
Okay, here's where we're gonna go. Share screen, now it's up and I'm ready to go. All right, so tonight what we're gonna work on is we're gonna look at the priorities of administrators. And I'm going to link in the bottom. Y'all can see my screen, correct? Okay, I see Wood now. I'm going to link these 4 articles in the chat. What you are going to do, let me get that down here. What you are going to do is you are going to go into your chat and open the article that goes with the group that you are going to be with. If I can get my chat to pull up. So hold on 1 second. Oh, it didn't do it. Heavens. All right, give me just a second. I'll put that in there. You're going to have an article that I'm going to send to you. And with your article, you are going to you are going to open it up. You're going to read it individually. And then you are going to I'm sorry, I'm doing 2 things and talking. You're going to think about what are the priorities of an administrator that you find in that article. Okay. So what are the priorities? What we're going to talk to you guys tonight about is all the different things you have to handle as an administrator, because it's not just 1 or 2 things. There's a lot of different things that you will have to deal with as an administrator. And so we're going to talk about your priorities, your everything that is on your plate, and how you're going to balance this, because balance is going to be the key to you being successful. So right now I'm putting your articles in the chat as we speak. Some of them are a little longer than others, so we're going to give you a few minutes to do this. And the last one. And what I want you to be able to do is when you come back, I just want you to be ready, choose who's going to be your speaker. Oops, hold on a minute. And you're going to be ready to talk to us about what that article tells you about being an administrator and the priorities that go along with it. One of the articles is not talking just about being a school principal or school administrator. It's talking about being an administrator in general. And so we're going to compare those articles when we get back, okay? So I'm gonna put you in breakout rooms. Before I send you off, I'll tell you which article, and I want you to open your article in your next tab. So I'm gonna put you in a breakout room and tell you which article to get out of the chat. You open it in the next tab, and then you'll go to your breakout room, okay? We're gonna have about 20, 25 minutes where you're reading your article and talking. If you don't need that long, you can come on back, okay? Anybody got questions? Everybody good? Okay, breakout room. Dr. Lamb, will you give me breakout rooms? If I can put them in there. Thank you, sir.
To make you the co-host.
Okie dokie.
That should give you permission to do that.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, breakout room 1, the people, Alex, Daphne, Heather, and Megan, y'all are breakout 1. So you're gonna go over into the chat and download the article that goes with group 1. Group 2, Angie, Monica, Paris, and Shalane. Y'all are group 2, so you get the second article. Group 3, oh, I probably need to get one person off for one of those. Hold on a minute. Emily, Marcia, and Wood. Y'all are group 3. Group 4, Savannah and Wanda. And Megan, I'm going to pull you off of group 1 and put you in group 4 so that there's 3 in that room, okay? Everybody know where they're at. Alex, Daphne, Heather, you're group 1. So you're going to pull that article and open it up in a different browser so you're ready. 2, Angie, Monica, Paris, and Shalane. 3, Emily, Marsha, Wood. And 4, Megan, Savannah, and Wanda. Everybody good? Okay, I'm going to open your rooms. Wood's frozen. How are you?
I'm good. It was committee day at Gardner Webb.
Busy day.
So the first Wednesday of the month is College of Education faculty meeting. The second Wednesday is if you are elected to a university committee, it's committee day. And so I tried to make, I did 3 years on finance and I did 3 years on ed policy and standards. And I tried to make enough people mad that they wouldn't vote for me anymore. And I did, but then I got appointed to athletics anyway, after I told everybody not to vote for me. After last year, I probably whined about that before. I had a terrible year last year in terms of I was chair of EPSC, and that handles all the appeals, academic, all the grade appeals, academic, attendance policy. I mean, it was awful. Had the faculty in revolt because of the success, student success dean who's actually resigned. She got treated so badly. Was trying to get instructors to stop punishing students with attendance, making these crazy attendance rules, like I'm taking 3 points off your final grade for every attendance. And so at 75% attendance, we had students who were failing who had an A in the class and did not violate the university's attendance policy, but got a failing grade in courses because the instructors were being very punitive. And here, the thing is that they're such terrible instructors that students won't come to their class unless you make them.
Right.
And they didn't like that. When I had one idiot get up, of course, he's in the business school. They ought to make him wear a helmet. And said that making college kids come to class is training them for the world of work. And I thought, what century are you in? You can't be, well, yeah, you can be that dumb. You're in the business. But we fought, the Dean of College Arts and Science wanted to redo the foundation courses, the remedials for when you take kids that should have been at community college, but we're taking them now that don't actually qualify to be in the first level courses, you know, the core courses like math and you know, the music and the English went okay, but the math was a floor fight. And, oh, it was nasty, and he ended up getting fired over it.
Oh, God.
Yeah, well, he you know, he made a real bad decision in that he gave them 4 courses back, 4 loads, 3-hour loads, which was a whole position that was going to be cut by changing what they were doing. And he paid them a stipend to build the shells for the new courses. Well, we don't give stipends at Gardner Webb for building shells. And when the president found out, he fired him. He fired the Dean of Arts and Sciences. He's gone.
Wow.
And so, but brokering all those meetings with them and the arguing and I mean, it was like a 20-hour week job last year with all the stuff that we had going on. It was just crazy time, crazy. And so, and I've explained to them, I don't need the rank or the promotion or any of that stuff. I have it all.
Right.
Give these jobs to young people who are trying to make promotion and tenure and rank. I don't do tenure because I don't believe in it, but I've made all the promotion and rank. And so why don't you give these to other people? And so I got everybody to vote against me. Then dang, they didn't appoint me anyway. And so I had that today. And then the third week of the month is for your departmental meetings. Well, I do mine on Mondays. And I keep my folks, well, you've seen, I do mine every other Monday. And then the fourth week is the general faculty meeting. And so today it was my turn to be I had to be the recording secretary and pray today. So I had to do the prayer and then I had to do and we had a long agenda today. So I had to get home in 2 hours, type up the minutes from the meeting and get those submitted. And so just a whiny, aggravating day. And so I'll try not to be too whiny and aggravating.
I had a day of alternate ed where we're trying to figure out what to do with these kids that can't do school.
Now, you just hit upon something that is kind of a pet peeve of mine. Well, it's not a pet peeve, but it's one. One of the things that we were blessed with in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, we had alternative schools, but we also had an alternate school. You know, the alternative school is for kids with behavior problems. The alternate school is for kids who can't do regular school.
Right.
And so we had Plaza Midwood for them, and Ken Mazzaferro ran it. Now that was a weird bunch. I'll just tell you right now. But you need you a place like that. They do not belong in an alternative school. That only
And
makes
that's
things
where our
worse.
problem is.
There
That's
you
what we
go.
talked
That
about
only makes
today.
things worse. When I was in charge of that for CMS, that's the first thing I did was went back. And when I set it up, you know, full disclosure, I set up that system in Burke County. Now that's been 30 years ago. I set up that system in Burke County. I founded College Street School. They call it something else now. But I founded College Street School because that's what they've hired me into the central office to do. And we set up an alternative program, but alternate program as well. And we did the Family Resource Center. We did some adult ed classes. You know, we did a number of GED. We did a number of things. We took the old Morganton Junior High downtown on College Street downtown
Mm-hmm.
and used the whole thing, and we had it. And so the alternate school was for kids who couldn't, you know, who couldn't operate during the regular day. And the school could just put them over there. And then, of course, we had the ones by hearing who had gotten trouble, but we didn't put them together. But,
Right.
you know, but then when I got to CMS, we had that part figured out in CMS already. I'd kind of monitored since I had worked on the Chapel Hill team in CMS. I knew that. That's where I got the idea from. I wasn't smart enough to figure that out on my own. But, and so I had done that work. I had been a consultant with them on the university team from Chapel Hill. And so, but that's exactly what it is. You're just lighting the fire to yourself to put alternate kids and alternative kids in the same place. You're just asking.
Well, and what we talked about today is we're starting to see normally the kids that they bring to us that are like, we're just now starting to get kids that are like repeat behavior kiddos. And these are kids that aren't able to do school, but they're really not kids that need an alternative placement.
They're not, they didn't do something to get a 10-day suspension and exclusion. They didn't bring a gun or,
Right.
you know, they didn't, you know, do a sexual assault or any of that. That's what we're talking about. They didn't do,
Right.
you know, an act of crime or violence that would get you put into an alternative school. They just can't do school.
Right.
And the problem with putting them in alternative schools, they just become victims.
Well, and that's why I said to a principal today, he was like, he can't come back here. He's causing utter havoc in my building. And I said, but he can't go to an alternative school. He's not an alternative school kid. We've got to come up with something else. And I said, we need an alternate, we're doing in elementary school. We started doing 180 academies, which is a day treatment infused program that we're doing. And it's working great for elementary, but I need one for middle school right now.
Yeah, you know, you need a full range of options. You need like a McLeod Center for your drug kids,
Yes.
you know, because, you know, you need a place like that. But now, one of the problems you get into is when you close, see, Mecklenburg County closed Gatlin, which was the youth facility for offenders, was a locked facility. You need to have all of your options available. If you've got that, then some of these kids, when they get adjudicated in court for these crimes that they committed at school, they can go there, which helps you as well. I mean, they need a little time and a lot. If you brought a gun to school and discharged it, it wouldn't be a bad thing for you to spend a little time reflecting on that in a locked facility.
Right.
You know, that's what we're talking about. The super violent ones who committed violent acts of crime and violence, or the 9 acts of violence defined by state law, if they've committed one of those, you need a locked facility for them. And then for the other ones, you need an alternative school. And then for kids who aren't being successful, you need an alternate program for them. And, you know, one of the things that Cleveland County is doing, and I don't know that I agree with this, but this is what they're doing, because I have a friend who's got a son who's, they're just putting all their alternate kids in the virtual academy. Every one of them.
I don't like that either because that puts them on the street.
Well, that's what I mean. That's why I don't like it. And his son's a perfect example. You need to have a rope around him. If you don't, he'll just take off and leave. Now, I don't mean that he'll leave and get in trouble. I don't mean that he'll leave and shack up, or, you know, he'll just decide he's into music in a big way, and he's super talented, as most autistic kids are. He is autistic, but he is super duper talented. Now, I don't say that lightly, but in terms of, he already has a sponsorship from Pedal Steel Company that makes pedal steel, like, you know, Nashville to Texas. He's already a sponsored artist, and he's only 18 years old. He's been playing professionally on records and sessions since he was 16. He is a savant, though. He is autistic, but he's an incredible pedal steel player, which is about the hardest thing you can do in the music business is be a good pedal steel player. He is. And so, but he'll just say, I want to go to Nashville, just get in the truck and go. I mean, you can't, that's the downside of those kinds of kids. You put them on the street, and if they're not responsible enough to go to school, how do you think they're going to be responsible enough to monitor themselves during the day? They're not. So I said, but that's what Cleveland County has done. But that's the solution that they've come up with, that those kids don't belong in an alternative school. They don't have the wherewithal to do an alternate school, so they're doing a virtual academy with it.
Well, we're trying not to do that because of a couple of things. Those kids need to be home. I mean, they need to be in school. They don't need to be out on the streets, and that's what happens if they're virtual academy. And then also middle school and high school, like the only way virtual academy works for elementary kiddos is if parents are there to monitor and supervise.
Well, of course.
But then for middle and high, you've got to have those independent workers. Their scores are hard if they're not true virtual kids that can do virtual learning.
Well, of course, it's worse academically, but it is a solution. Now, I'll say this, and now I'm guilty of this. I'm still here. Now,
You're fine.
I've had parents come into the school and accost me and say, this suspension that you have given my child is not good for my child. And what I would say to them is, I completely agree with you. I never told you that suspension was good for your child. What I said is it was good for the rest of us. We need a break from your child. I've said that more than once. If I hadn't been big before my furniture disease, my chest fell in my drawers, I'm sure that a couple of them would have wanted to tackle me, but they thought better of it. But the notion here is the virtual academy deal is giving the rest of us a break. We're not saying it's good for the kid. And that's why I'm saying I don't like it. But it is meeting the
But
needs.
it's reality.
But the reality is it's giving the rest of us the break that we need. I'm not telling you that it's a good thing for the kid that's participating in it. And that's the part I don't like about it. And that's why I can't support that notion. But I do understand it. My point is I do understand it. And it is a valid point that it's giving the rest of us, some breathing room here. But it can't be a long term. It's got to be just a temporary till we can figure something else out. But I have a sneaking suspicion that in Cleveland County, knowing them, that this is their long-term plan.
What I would love to do is I feel like it's a need for middle school. I would love to open an alternate classroom.
Yeah.
That is a 9 weeks program. We have 2 teachers that go in there and we work on, they're in that classroom all day, almost like a classroom 180. And they work on skills with the goal of transitioning out to the next. And that would allow, you could have 10 to 15 kids. And then you could say next 9 weeks, we will open it up for another 10 to 15 kids to really work on transitioning them back out to the traditional classroom.
Well, what you can do is what I did when I was a junior high principal. I did in the 7th grade, what I did was those kids that couldn't handle school, I put them on a team and we called it Project Success. And we worked on their skills and got them some extra support. But we did basically a school within a school. I brought them down on the hall, down where the main office was near me, where it was easiest to supervise. They were away from the cafeteria. They were away from the gym. They were away from everybody. That one little section of hall in the old building there, I dedicated it to them so that they wouldn't have all the distractions. They wouldn't have the gym nothing was happening. The way the school had evolved is you come up Biscayne Drive off of Eastway, the front of the school, and there's the old building. And they built more buildings and more behind it. But the school had eventually oriented, and they eventually, after I left, built on and built a new front building in the back, because the back of the school, Norland, had become the front. And so, but the office was still in the old front of the school. And so I moved those kids, those seventh graders in Project Success, down there on that hallway where there wasn't anybody else around. Because when you came in, just like the old school, all the offices and everything were over the left, and there was one little stretch of classrooms over on the right. Moved them over there, away from everything. No disturbance. Nobody comes in the front of the school there, nothing. Everybody, all the traffic is in the, comes through the back of the school. So they never saw anybody. They never, nobody ever went by their room. There was no need for anybody to be on that hall but them.
Right.
And when we would put them in there, we would close the doors to the lobby. They had their own little world. We put those kids separately. We got them extra support, an extra counselor and some extra people. And we got them where they didn't have to do everything everybody else did. And so that we could transition them by the time that they were in the 8th grade, then they were ready to have school was the idea. And that's what we did with them. So for middle school, it would be 6th grade. But for me, because we were junior high, 7, 9, I used 7th graders. But I did Project Success.
I'm gonna have to talk to her. That's one of my things that I put on my list to talk to her about next week is there a room in a school that we can use that we can make something like that?
Yes. And make it where everybody on that team, and it might just be one of the groups, but everybody that switches those, I did a 4-person switch with them. So that one teacher didn't have to keep them all day. And they got in the habit of rotating classes, because you got to get them ready for high school. You can't keep them self-contained for so long. And had them switch between those 4 teachers on that hall. And
That might be a good idea, looking at how we can do even plug and pay to use teachers we already have.
Yeah.
I like it. All right, how is everybody? Did y'all get it done? Was that enough time? Okay.
Heck yeah.
All right, so let's start with Article 1. Talk to me about what it had to say about the role of a principal.
So it kind of talked about 5 things that you need to do to be an effective principal. So you have to look for academic success for all students. You need to make sure that we're paying attention to the climate. When the climate's good, the learning's better. You need to focus on learning is at the center, safety, orderliness, and supportive response to teachers and students. And to make sure that you're building a sense of community, being solution-oriented, welcoming, and upbeat in the school. One of the other things they said about cultivating leadership, when you spread the leadership around, there's higher test scores amongst the students. And you need to make sure that you're cultivating collaboration between the teachers and the leaders. It discussed improving instruction by having higher expectations and continue to encourage teachers to work on professional development and learning. It also talked about managing the people by looking at the data and processes, and to make sure that you're being selective in hiring. You don't need people that don't want to look at the data and work on the different processes to work on student achievement and learning. It also talked about 6 processes to focus on to be an effective administrator, looking at planning the high standards, implementing and meeting targets, supporting and encouraging students and teachers, advocating to challenge the low expectations for students, communicating, making sure that we talk to families and the communities about the goals of the students that are supposed to be learning, and monitoring and making sure that you're keeping on top of the test results of the students. It also talked about effective leadership is making sure you define the clear jobs for principals, assistant principals, providing high quality training for the principals, hiring selectively, and making sure you're evaluating principals and supporting them when they need that support.
Do you think
I
a
know,
job of an
Alex.
administrator is big? I
Yes.
think there's a lot to it. Which one of those is the most important?
I don't think anyone is like super important, but to make sure that all the others working well, I think building a sense of community and climate at the school is most important in order to get teachers to focus on those high expectations for all, engaging the community and parents, improving instruction, and cultivating the leadership. I think climate is first and foremost most important.
I would like to add one thing to that. Something that I read in the article is, and that we talked about in our group, is that, you know, establishing that climate and those expectations doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. And I think one of the things that at the end of the article, it talked about that a good rule of thumb is that principles should be in place around 5 to 7 years in order for actual, you know, change or to benefit from that change. And I think we were discussing that, you know, and even in the article, it talked about how on average principals hang around in their schools an average of like 3.6 years. So I think that was definitely something that was sort of an aha for us, because, you know, I know for a fact, you know, I've worked for multiple principals that have been there 2 or 3 years and then get moved and don't really have an opportunity to fully, you know, establish their culture and their school climate to really see, you know, that improvement and that growth in that school take place.
Alex, I would agree with that. And I think one of the things, I'm at district now, but being at a school level, I was at a school, both of the schools that I was at 4 years, AP 6 years before that. So I was at that same school for almost 10 years. Then I was at a school for 5 years. Previous administrations have really been every 2 to 3 years. We keep that change going because we need to keep fresh, was what I always was told was the mindset. With Dr. Booker, he tries to leave people more. However, there are times where if it's not producing results, you can't, for the benefit of students, continue to leave people. Does that make sense? And then you start thinking about one of the things you'll be able to relate back to is when you make a change in teachers for whatever reason, even sometimes it's just a teacher retires or a teacher moves. When you move one person, the domino that creates in order to make sure that everybody's balanced. But I agree. I think it takes starting a school from scratch where I was able to hire my own staff. Building climate and culture took a good year and a half. That was it. We were rocking it. Going from assistant principal into principal in the same school, it took me a good 3 years to get to the point that I had the trust of people. So hearing you guys talk about climate being a top priority in order for all of the other things that Heather talked about happening, what is one thing that you need to be aware of when you go into an assistant principalship? Can you change the climate of a school regardless of who the principal is?
I think as an AP, being a first year AP, and South Point has had a lot of changes in APs over the last couple of years. I think going in your first year, you need to sit back, watch, observe, see what works, what doesn't work, gradually change things, little things here and there, and gain that trust of the teachers before you can start making full, quick, fast changes in the whole school. Because I don't think when you make drastic changes, you can get buy-in from the teachers, in my opinion.
And so I think, Heather, I would agree with that. I think sometimes sometimes you have to make change because what's happening is not good and you have to do that. But to create a culture and a climate where change is not a scary thing, where you have trust and people are going to buy in just because you're asking them to do it and you're wanting them to do it. You've got to go in, and your first 6 weeks, 9 weeks has to be on building relationships, being visible. But there are times you're going to go into a building and you're going to have to make change right away because what's happening is not what's right for kids. And that has to always be the reason you make the decisions you make. All right, group 2, talk to me about what you.
Before we
went over.
go on, I'm gonna ask a question. I want to direct this one, I guess, probably to Alex. Again, congratulations, new daddy.
Thank you.
You talked about building a culture of teaching and learning. I agree 1,000%. That's your biggest task, is to create a culture of teaching and learning. And so this question is for everybody, anybody, everybody. Which of the 6 evidences, and you're working on the 5th or the 6th. So which of the 6 is kind of the blueprint or the roadmap of how you build a culture of teaching and learning? Which of those 6 evidences?
The CAP.
Cap.
Okay.
I think
That-
it's the APSL because it's your PLCs. You got to start there.
Okay, you got to start with your app cell. That's right. You got to start with your data. And know who can do what, where, and when. That's what we talked about earlier tonight. You got to know your data, and you got to have critical conversations when you say a teacher's not performing based on what. But then think about this one. We work on culture of our building, but that culture is more of working conditions, because we base it off teacher working condition survey for the CAP. We start with the app cell, the first one that that results matter, outcomes matter, standardized testing matters. That's the first thing that we have to establish in our culture, that performance outcomes matter. That it's not just about input, it's outcomes. That's the first thing we do. And then our second evidence is which one?
The app too.
Aptel.
The APTEL. And that's about creating a culture of teaching and learning. Who do we want to identify to be potentially our school leaders? School leaders being teach other teachers, be involved in personnel, be involved in the budget, be involved in school improvement plan, and be involved in curriculum. Those 5 areas of school leadership that Todd Whitaker identifies. Who do we want to fulfill those roles? Who do we reward with those school-wide leadership roles? Who do we reward with those? Our best teachers. The coin of the realm. If you want to build a culture of teaching and learning, the coin of the realm is good classroom instruction. Being a leader in your own classroom. It all circles back to instruction. You've got to build a culture of teaching and learning, and where the most important thing in your building is good instruction. That's the piece. When people talk about building a culture in their building, it has to start with performance. It has to start with teachers who are good practitioners of those high yield strategies and get good test results. It has to be that and nothing else. What do they do at Jones Sausage? They make sausage. What do we do in school? We teach kids. Can't ever forget that. I'm done.
All right, group 2.
I'll be the speaker for tonight for group 2. Our article was titled Leading Learning Communities, Pillars, Practices, and Priorities for Effective Principals. And as a group, collectively, Angie, Monica, Paris, and myself, we identified 3 critical components: culture, systems, and people. And an effective principal needs to put key priorities in those areas to include creating positive work environment for kids and students who are there daily, allocating resources to individuals or groups who need them on a timely basis, construct organizational policies based on local, federal, and state guidelines, bridging gaps between internal and external factors that are affecting teaching and learning, and being effective instructional leaders. We also talked about an effective principal leads by valuing, defending, and cultivating diversity, equity, and inclusion of all students, developing trust and positive relationships among students and staff, and also having high expectations for students and teachers' growth, and encouraging social and emotional development. We also looked at, I know we asked for priorities, but we found interesting, there's a quote from the article on the pillars, and that represents what of the principalship. These pillars, they are mutually supportive and mutually dependent and overlapping. Without one, the strength of the other. Two is compromise. So you can't develop culture or not develop culture and expect that the people and the systems are going to work effectively. So you have to focus and give priority to all three elements. Any of my teammates want to chime in? Hello?
So she said,
Think you
build
did
culture, build culture. Everything you do influences everything that happens in your building.
Yeah.
You have to walk the walk always in everything you do, how you treat people every time, when you're mad, when you're happy, when you're sad, you have to model. Empowering people. When I first read that article and I saw it said empowering people, because we just talked about, and what Dr. Lamb just said, and what I said is, who is our number one priority? Students. Empowering people, it said you have to create the environment where you enable effective teaching. So who's benefiting there?
Students again.
Students. And then you have to optimize your systems, making you a master of managing people, data, and processes. And I love what Charlene said. These are three pillars, and when one falls, the other two are going to crumble. You have to be able to manage all components. Good job. Let's go to group 3.
I'm going to be the spokesperson for group 3. Hopefully y'all can hear me. Internet's acting up a bit, but Emily and Marcia were also in group 3. We had a list of about 23 and 12 billion items that the principal needed to do, but we decided that actually, as we're reading through them, that they fit pretty well into 3 larger categories. And we've actually talked about 2 of them pretty well so far. Culture is obviously what we've been talking about in the other 2 groups. Instruction as well, so as being like your major priority. And how do you do that? Well, you've got to establish a good culture, right? The students are your main priority. You want to minimize distractions. So there's things like discipline came up in the article. Well, really, why do you deal with discipline? It's to minimize those distractions, to maximize instructional time, right? And then, well, finally, throughout all of it was communication. So the principal needs to be a master communicator in all aspects, whether that be, communicating what the vision and mission and vision for the school needs to look like, what modeling the culture, like what we just talked about, and communicating, what the new and, get better, faster instructional practices are going to look like. So those 3 major elements permeated all 21 billion, I think there were just 21 bullet points, were culture, instruction, and communication. And we felt that they were all pretty evenly matched, but that culture and instruction were up there, but communication obviously ran through all 3. Oh, yeah, all of them.
I
Y'all
would
want to help me
challenge
out?
you when you become an assistant principal. Every time you get a chance to look at how principals communicate, think about your experience as a teacher. Culture is heavily relying on communication. If you're in a school where you don't feel like you know what's going on, does that impact your culture? If you're in a, I am not the best communicator. Because I think I know what I'm talking about, but I didn't always come out to where you know what I'm talking about. And I assume you do, and I don't understand why you don't. You got to know your weaknesses. But I'll tell you, as a leader, I learned to communicate effectively, but it just was because everybody else learned how I communicated, and I was very consistent in my crazy communication. Does that make sense? So you don't always have to have the best system. You have to be consistent, and you have to stick with your system so that they learn and understand how to read what you're talking about. Does that make sense? I'll also tell you a piece of advice that somebody gave me. As you hire, have you ever heard people talking about hire well? One way you do that as an administrator is you hire to your weakness. I'm very big picture. I had Beth Washley. If you're an elementary person, she works as a curriculum facilitator, and she's
Yes, she is.
I hired Sierra Jennings, who's the AP at Belmont Middle. If you know her, she is very, I need that in my life. My husband is very, I need that in my life. Know what you need and hire to your weakness. Bring somebody in that's going to fill the gaps that you have, so then you can be your leader and they can support your work. Anybody got anything they want to add to that? Savannah, I saw you raise your hand just a minute ago, and I wrote Savannah down because I started talking, or we went to the next group and I didn't get to hear you. So what did you want to say?
Well, I was just going to say there's a part my group was talking about that kind of resonated with me while Dr. Lamb was talking, because, you know, he always says champion for kids. And moving your lens from a teacher to an admin, I admit, has been the hardest for me. Like, I struggle a lot. I feel like, I was telling my group, I feel like I just sound like a kindergarten teacher when I talk in this group. But part of our a part in ours is making change not a dirty word. So when we're talking about, you have to have a staff create the climate that change is necessary, and it happens all the time in education. It has to be a thing your staff is willing to accept, and you get a lot of resistance from that. But like you said, and like Dr. Lamb said, and all the other people have said, it's about the kids, and it's so hard. That's so obvious, but it's so hard to look past that when you're trying to get buy-in from your teachers. But that's what our job is. It's evolving, it's changing, and you're never going to have that perfect observation. You're never going to have that you're done, you're at the top. So I think the climate and making that change not a dirty word, which Megan will talk about from ours, is just a way that we can look past and try to support teachers, but with the kids in the end mind result.
And Savannah, that is so important when you think about changing to meet the needs of learners. And if you can help your teachers understand, if we teach to the way we learn, we've lost kids because they're not the same as we were. We have to make sure that we are ever changing. One of the rules, and I probably have told you this, but one of the rules at Hawk's Nest was we did things no more than 2 years in a row. After 2 years, it had to be tweaked, it had to be changed, it had to be looked at, and we had to modify it and update it. Why? Because if you keep getting in that rut of this is how we've always done it, then you're going to continue to be one of those people that pull out those lesson plans from 8 years ago and you try to do that same exact lesson plan all over again. And kids learn differently. Therefore, we've got to tweak and change what we're doing to meet what kids need. So I love, don't be scared of change. It's got to be a good thing, and it's got to be part of who we are and what we do now. All right, Megan, it sounds like you're on. That she just laid the way for you.
Yes, ma'am. So we had 7 leadership strategies to fuel business success. And while it was business, every strategy related back to education. So I'm going to say the 7 strategies, and then I'm going to pick out some of the key ones that we found were super important. So number 1 was set goals. 2 was get and use talent effectively. 3 is change is not a dirty word. 4, challenge yourself in team. 5 is always be teaching and learning. 6, anticipate problems. And 7, reward initiative and success. So Savannah's already kind of talked about that change is not a dirty word. And we talked about how that's imperative in education. But we also talked about how your approach to change matters just as much as the change itself. So when you get that resistance, you have to build trust and culture and community in your building in order for teachers to, get on board with that change. And that comes with rewarding initiative and success. When you celebrate the good things that happen, your teachers are going to be more willing to change what they're doing to better meet the needs of learning. And that's going to help anticipate problems. So you can predict problems. You can stay up to date with current, trends and listen to their concerns. And that's always going to kind of go back to helping that change and that culture. So those 3 things kind of hit our top of our list, because everything else kind of falls into place. When you can then set goals, you can, see what teachers and how to use them and their talents effectively. And you can always be teaching and learning and improving skills. And everything else kind of falls into place when you approach that change, how you approach that change. And then from there, everything else can, be set into place by that.
Who wants to add to that? That was good, Megan.
We also noticed a pattern in all the headers in our article about self-evaluation and constantly recognizing your areas of weakness, because again, it goes back to that ever-changing thing and how you can't get complacent. So we noticed that as a theme in ours as well.
And I would say that is so important. Your teachers need to see that you're not an expert at everything, that you're not a know-it-all. They need to hear you say, I don't know, let me find out. They need to hear that. That's important, because guess what that gives them permission to do? That gives them the permission to say, I don't know, let me find out. One of the things that I loved at the very end of y'all's article, it said, running a business is an accomplishment. And I added, running a school is a superpower, because there's so much that you have to balance. Your discussion board this week is the multifaceted role of the principal as buffer and bridger, facilitator and focuser, illustrates the versatility and skill needed by today's great leaders. I want you to spend a little bit of time this week, and I want you to think, what is that statement to you? And what are the focused areas of exploration and growth that you need to embark upon? Because we're all supposed to be learning. What are the things that you need to put yourself out there and learn to be prepared to become an administrator? Because your time of schooling, your educational time, is starting to wrap up, right? And you've got to make sure that you have explored. Dr. Lamb says all the time, you're in your classrooms, most of you now, but what are you doing to prepare yourselves to be a leader in your building as an administrator? What are you seeking out the opportunities to go and learn and be ready for, so that when you become an administrator, remember we talked about in interviewing, you've got to go in there and sell yourself, and you've got to be able to talk about a lot of things. So what are those things that you want to explore for your personal growth as an administrator? And so that's your discussion board this week. Next week, we are going to look at, the next 2 weeks, we're going to look at MTSS. I'm going to my page just to talk about. We're going to look at MTSS as a framework. Why? Because this is a curriculum and instruction class. And where does MTSS fit? Right in the middle of it. It oversees all that we do with curriculum instruction. So we're going to talk about the different components of instruction and how they fit within that MTSS model. We're going to talk about how you use the MTSS framework to tier your staff to make sure you're providing the adequate supports to the teachers based on need, and that you're not providing a one-size-fits-all program to support staff, because they have different needs. And data drives the needs that your staff has just as much as data drives what your students need. Then we're going to go the next week looking at 21st century classrooms and doing our final observation And then looking at, as a leader, in the MTSS framework, you have to do attendance. Kids have to be at school, right? Behavior. I'm going to introduce you to our administrator behavior guidelines and policies, because as a leader, you have to have attendance in place and behavior in place to begin to provide this awesome instruction we've been talking about. Okay. And that's how we'll wrap up our time together. Because that'll take us through week 14, and then week 15 is when you'll be doing your presentations of our final book study. Okay. Does anybody have anything for the good of everybody?
Me?
Yes, sir.
Please remember to go back to your 603 shell from last semester. One of your weekly activities, if you remember, you had to audit your intervention plan at your school, your what you got at your school. That would be helpful for next week, just as a reminder.
Okay. Y'all have a great week. Enjoy your day off Friday, and we'll see you next week. Bye, y'all.